You're listening to the B2B Revenue Executive Experience, a podcast dedicated to helping executives train their sales and marketing teams to optimize growth. Whether you're looking for techniques and strategies or tools and resources, you've come to the right place. Let's accelerate your growth in 3, 2, 1.
Welcome, everyone, to the B2B Revenue Executive Experience. I'm Carlos Noche, and I'm joined by my always insightful podcast partner, Lisa Schneier. How you doing today, Lisa?
I don't know how insightful I am today, Carlos, but I'm going to try my best.
Sometimes we talk about the weather. Today is a weird weather here in North Georgia. We're gonna have like a 40-degree shift. We're gonna go from 64 to 26 tonight.
Yeah, same here. We had thunderstorms last night. February thunderstorms in Eastern Canada. Not very often.
I know when I cry about our weather, you just laugh at me.
I do.
All right, everyone. Today, we're going to talk about various aspects of building your startup from zero, including a topic that seems to be getting a lot of traction these days, and that is product-led growth strategies. What are they? When should you use them? And when might you want to pivot to a sales-led growth strategy?
And to help us out today, we have Brett Martin, an entrepreneur, co-founder, and investor at Charge Ventures. Charge is a New York City-based pre-seed, seed stage venture fund. They invest in the earliest stages of a company formation and then help founders to take things from 0 to 1. He's also helped launch things like Vice Media, might have heard of that one, right, listeners? And sailed a 30-foot sailboat over 6,000 miles with no previous experience. So there's not much you can do to scare Brett. Brett, thank you for taking the time today and welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. Pleasure to be here. And excited to jam.
Awesome. All right, Brett. Question that we always use to kick this thing off so our listeners can get to know you a little bit better. What might be something that you're passionate about that those that primarily know you through business might be surprised to know about you?
Well, sailing, I guess, is a supposedly fun thing I'll never do again. But I'm actually here in coming live from Salt Lake City, and I had to pick up backcountry snowboarding and splitboarding. I think it was a term of my engagement with my fiance. So learning how to climb mountains and then ride down them right now. That's the current project.
Amazing. Sounds like a lot of fun, and still slightly dangerous. So you've got that little bit of like fear to everything that you do, eh?
Healthy amount of fear keeps you feeling alive, I think.
Good. Yeah, seek that adrenaline rush.
Is splitboarding is that what happens when you go down the mountain and your board breaks in half?
Intentionally, but the other way around. So when you're going up the mountain and you break it in half, you take the snowboard, you split it into two, you put what are called skins, which are basically like Velcro on the bottom of the skis, and the snowboard is now two skis, and then you kind of Velcro your way up. You walk up the mountain, then you reassemble it, and you ride down.
Wow. Yeah, no kidding.
Technology
really
these
cool.
days.
Yeah, who knew? So apart from splitboarding, sailing, skiing, whatever you're doing, snowboarding, tell us a little bit more about your journey, Brett, because how did you end up where you are today, and what were the steps you took?
Well, I've always been building or investing in early stage companies, other than my first 2 years out of college, where I did the classic investment banking thing, and I knew then that that wasn't for me, and I kind of immediately moved into starting companies, and so my last sort of job, I guess, was I was a entrepreneur in residence at Primary Venture Partners, which is like a kind of $1 billion under management seed fund in New York City with Brad and Ben, and then I started Charge Ventures, which is our pre-seed stage New York fund. I was doing that. I guess I've been doing that for 9 years. I guess 6 years into it, saw this opportunity to build kind of a new way of working for remote work. We saw how productive everyone could continue to be, on Zoom and Slack. I think everyone was kind of surprised by how the world didn't stop when the pandemic hit. And but it was good enough, right? It wasn't as good, and that's and as being together in an office, and sort of saw this opportunity and said, hey, what if we built tooling for remote workers where they could be together, they could connect seamlessly, they could see who's around, they could have lots of interactions every day, just like in a physical office. And so that was the formation of Kumospace, which is we incubated Charge, and is run by my good friend Yang Mao, and we've really been building that out for the past couple of years in addition to Charge. So I guess I've just been doing the same thing. I've only been able to hold down a job for 2 years, and the rest of the time I've been building or investing.
Excellent. So, as an investor, what might be some of the things you look for from an investment perspective? What are the things you look for in a startup to say, hey, that might be a quality company to put our funding behind?
For me, I was happily investing, and then when I saw sort of Kumospace, I was, it had all the characteristics. So I have a thing I say, which is, all good businesses look the same. So all good businesses have lots of revenue, growing really quickly with super high margin. They've got some viral effect. Oftentimes they have network effects. They have excellent management teams with years of deep experience in that space, and some unique advantage over their competition. And so when I see that, I usually try to give those companies money, because it's a lot easier to give someone money and then check in 10 years later and get your money back and then some. That's not actually how it works, but it's a lot easier to invest than it is to build. In my own case, with Kumospace, we saw all those characteristics, but for me, what made it unique in terms of participating in the entrepreneurship, my unique personal connection to the mission, right? So every company I've ever built has been leveraging technology to create some sort of new form of human interaction that's more authentic or more genuine. So, my first company, Sonar, was how to use, mobile technology to connect you, have more authentic in-person connections with people. Switch, the second company, which actually I've built all these with Yang, who's the current CEO of Kumospace, was how do you use mobile technology to connect people around jobs. So it's kind of like a Tinder for jobs product. And then Kumospace is solving the problem of, hey, there hasn't been really a way to have a bunch of people in the same place at the same time that can move freely between conversations like you might in an office or at an event. And so that personally spoke to me. And I think there's lots of ways to make money, but if you're going to start a company, you should have some like deep personal connection to the problem you're solving.
Yeah, and in that comes the passion behind it that you're going to need in order to drive through all of the challenges you're going to face, right? And so on that point, are there any common mistakes, missteps, things that you see over and over again that startups make early on?
I just know I personally have made hundreds of mistakes, from building starting with the technology and looking for a problem, to hiring people that are overqualified, hiring people that are underqualified, not narrowing down my niche market quickly enough. I guess if I had to generalize, I would say that people's mistakes are probably often manifestations of their own personal biases and weaknesses. So, this salespeople going to sell, product people going to build, and they tend to sort of be hammers and looking for nails, as opposed to sort of problem finding machines, which is like really what a good entrepreneur does. We talk so much about like, oh, execution doesn't matter, execution's all that matters, execution all that matters. Well, it's not quite true, actually. Like, if you're gonna start a business, you should look for a really good problem to solve, and if not, then maybe you should do something else.
Fair enough. Yeah, we build it, they will come mentality. I've seen that myself over and over and over again. I'm like, did you talk to the market? Did you talk about if this problem is actually worth funding a solution for? Like, you know, there's just so many questions that your market can answer for you, but you have to have those conversations. You can't just come to the table with an idea and say this is going to be successful.
100%. And I guess, like, I would tie it back to this, for entrepreneurs, I tie it back to this, like, concept of, like, ikigai. Have you guys ever heard of that?
Hmm.
Right. So, it's like the Japanese concept
Purpose.
of, like, what you love, what you're good at, what the world needs, and what you can get paid for. And I think that, as an entrepreneur, that's like a really good framework to say, like, this is what I'm going to do, because, if what you love and what you got to be good at it. Obviously there's needs a problem, but then there's a question of what you can get paid for. And I think unless you have all four of those, like, it's probably not going to be a great business.
It's funny because when talking to some clients, especially startups, I always cringe when I go, so what problem does your product actually solve? He goes, we could do a lot of things. I mean, what would you like it to do? Oh boy. We built this tool set. Okay. So do you have any use cases? We could.
Well, everyone wants to be a platform, right? And I think it's a function of entrepreneurs are so ambitious, right? They're just, like, looking at that end game. They're looking at that $1 billion company. And to be fair, our VCs don't really help, right? Because all we're talking about is building the next $1 billion. We need a $1 billion company, $1 billion, large market. And entrepreneurs take that, and so they come at you and they say, hey, our market's $300 billion, right? When in reality, as a pre-seed investor, what I'm looking for is that micro, really tight go-to-market. Like, I feel like go-to-market slide is the most misunderstood slide in an entrepreneur's deck. And for me, I have a very specific thing, what I'm looking for in a go-to-market slide. And so what I want is, what is your niche, right? And the best niche is, it's both underserved and highly profitable, right? And sometimes that's hard to find, but a great example was 10 years ago, people found the plus size clothing market. And everyone was saying, it was kind of a realization in VC world, is wow, most Americans are plus sized, and there isn't very few clothing companies that are actually making plus size clothes. So that's a great example of a niche that is the majority of the market and is underserved. And then ideally they have large purchasing power, right? So once you find that niche, you say, okay, I can narrow down to the point, I'm going to build my product exactly for this customer, right? So you keep segmenting down the market until you can literally build the best product in the world for that particular niche. And if you can't build the best product in the world, you need to get smaller with your niche, right? So right now with Kumospace, we're building an all-in-one communications tool for remote and distributed teams. What we've realized is that we're really getting down to who our best customers are is agencies and consultancies. Why? They're mostly remote. They're human capital intensive. They have tons of collaboration. So you get down there and you say, okay, I can build a better product because Zoom isn't focused on agencies or consultancies. Slack isn't focused on that. I can build a better product. So then you've got really specific product. Then you have the best messaging, right? So, like, I can target, my messaging so specifically to this specific customer that I can speak their language, right? I can say, hey, video chat built for agencies. And people are like, what does that even mean? I don't know, but I'm intrigued. And then finally, and this is probably the least discussed, is you got the right niche, you got the right product, you got the right messaging. Then what's the right channel to get in front of that customer? Where do you fish for these folks, right? And so my favorite example of this is, like, do you guys know what the playbill is?
Yeah, like do you mean Broadway, like a playbill?
Exactly, right? It's that little brochure that they give you when you go to a show. So uh, it's very specific. And I remember seeing an advertisement for hearing aids in Playbill. And I remember thinking to myself, wow, this is the perfect channel product fit. Why? Because you're sitting in a symphony, right? It's super, it's a bunch of people who care about sound, they care about music, they're old, right? Because anyone going to the symphony is old, and they probably need hearing aids, and they have a super high willingness to pay, right? So that's like the perfect channel. So you got, you pick your niche, you pick your product, you scale your product to it, you put the perfect messaging on, and then you deliver through that channel. And to me, that's the perfect go to market.
That's amazing. Amazing. Yeah. I think that it's also there's so many like niche audiences. Like you're right about the broad audience obviously being like those older people with hearing challenges who really have like, a place in their heart or nostalgia for the symphony, but there's also audiophiles, right? So like say I'm an audiophile but I have hearing challenges, like people with disabilities or whatever, like there's so many different ways you can do that, but Playbill is a great place to market something like that. So I love that example, Brett. So shifting topics just slightly, because you were talking a little bit to us, or you had sent us this before about distributed teams. And I feel like our listeners don't fully understand the definition of that as compared to a remote team. So can you help walk us through what is a distributed team versus a remote team?
Yeah, for sure. So, I think when we tend to think about remote first or remote only, you're talking about people who are not in an office, who are, or who are only outside of an office. Remote first would be, that's the baseline, and then maybe occasionally you come into an office, whether it's once a week or once a month, etc. Distributed is just this concept that you know, any team that gets sufficiently large is going to be distributed across multiple physical locations, right? Like any Fortune 500 company is a distributed company. They're not putting, 10 or 50,000 people into one building. And even if you were in one building, the size of One World Trade or something, right? Being on the second floor, being on the 50th floor, you're probably not going up, walking over someone's desk every time you need a question, right? So at sufficient scale, any company becomes distributed. And that's why Kumospace is focused on saying, okay, at any scale, companies become distributed. What does that mean for their workflows? And I guess when I think about remote and distributed teams, you live in your tools, right? You do, like you all your work happens in your tools. There's no physical nexus for where everyone comes together and connects. So if your tools are fragmented and scattered, which has been, kind of the story of SaaS over the past 15 years is, tool fragmentation, then your teams are scattered. And then how do you, keep track of everyone? How do you know where everyone is? How do you communicate quickly? And then, how do you sort of build a culture of productivity if you're just spread out everywhere?
That makes sense. And so when you think about like there's obviously pros and cons to this. And what are some of the examples that you can think of in your experience of a really successful distributed team?
Yeah, I mean, I guess again, I think that like any multinational that has, you know, offices all over the world is doing something right with through organizational design. My good friend works at Amazon, and they have that crazy like leveling. They're like L8, L10. I don't know. We're working for the Empire, and I was just like sat there and I accidentally overheard, some of their conversation. And so much of their time is focused on organizational design and incentive, alignment, and just managing, kind of that workforce. And so, you know, one of the things that we think about at Kumo Space is like, onboarding. And I know that this is something that, y'all think about as training and bringing people up to speed and, getting people onboarded. It's like, well, when you onboarded to a remote or distributed team, like that first day is for most companies is a terrible experience, right? I'm ready. I'm sitting at my desk and I'm ready for my first day of work, and I'm just waiting for someone to call me or tell me what to do. And then all of a sudden, maybe some calendar invites start popping up, and I don't know who this person is. I don't know how they work. I don't know who they work with. I don't know who they're connected to. I need an answer to my question, and I have no idea where to start. I'm worried about bothering people and slacking them. And yeah, they're little green dots, so they're available, but are they really available? And now I have to schedule time with them, and I might not get my question answered, and till Friday, right? And so it's just like, it's so much worse than showing up. Here's my desk. Here's all the people I'm going to be working with, catching someone's eye, tapping them on the shoulder, right? And so at Kumospace, we're just trying to bring back what we already had, which is like this sense of awareness, visibility of who's around, who's available, being there and being accountable for each other, tapping someone on the shoulder, getting a quick answer to your question, and then also just like getting, seeing how the org works, right? This idea of like having an org chart that you can kind of look. I mean, we use an intranet for this today, but it's so much worse than just saying, hey, marketing's on the third floor. Go up there and find the answer.
Mm. Yeah, you're trying to recreate the water cooler conversation, right? Like, I'm struggling with this, you're just having that spontaneous conversation at the water cooler, as they say. And then somebody's like, "Well, that like Bob over in this department specializes in that." And that to recreate that virtually or like remotely is challenging.
Yeah, it's funny. Amazon, the new CEO of Amazon wrote this like memo about why they're returning to the office. And the irony is that, we sell software for remote and distributed teams, but we understand the value of the office, right? Like we get it. We know why people are returning to the office, right? It's like they want visibility of who's around. Managers do. They want accountability. They want people to basically be available for each other. They want to be able to collaborate and ideate and innovate, quickly. And they want to be able to build a culture of productivity and winning. And we agree with all of those things. We just don't think that you have to go to a physical box to get them.
So, Brett, this is a topic that kind of near and dear to my heart, because when COVID hit and we got off the road and we got to work home, I loved it. This is the most I've been home in my lifetime, I feel like. But also, I try to look at things different ways. People talk about getting back to the office, and at first I'm like, yeah. And then I think about my entire career. I go, I've traveled my entire career. I've never had, the 5 days a week, let's go to the office. If I was in the office, I wasn't doing my job. So I'm with you. I'm trying to find ways to get to work. I'm an investor in a small company that we've been running around for 11 years, and we made a million mistakes. And one of the things, and we're distributed in different cities. And one of the things that we did is we just, like, for example, I just hired a new sales guy in DC. And he's been, for his first couple of days, it was all remote. We had multiple calls set up to onboard him. And then on Monday, put him on a plane, flew him out to one of my other sales reps to go spend the day in that area and go learn those folks and have dinner together. Because once even if it's just a couple of days, you meet someone face to face, you break bread with them, then you feel more comfortable to call them at any time and talk to them. But if you got zero contact, I just feel it's hard to do that. So we intentionally found ways of, hey, when we bring people on board, we got to find ways either that we're meeting them face to face in their backyard, or they're meeting some of our people face to face, but then they're back to remote, because it's small teams in every city I got. It's not like I have, huge offices that you go to. I don't even own an office. And it's kind of helped in creating it. So I like your term of distributed teams. I think organizations really need to think about it. It's not the office that created camaraderie. It's the being together on a project. It's, hey, bringing Brett from New York and bringing Lisa from Canada and bringing someone else from California together somewhere to work on something to build that camaraderie that creates that culture that lasts forever, in my opinion.
100%. I mean, consultancies, KPMG, PwC have been, some of our earliest customers in Kumospace because they've always been remote, right? And they've been doing this for 20, 30, 40 years. So they're nothing new. And I think they're excited that people are finally making, dedicated technology.
All right. So, hey, a lot of startups these days seem to be enamored with this thing called product-led growth strategies or approaches. Can you help us define it for our audience? What's meant by it?
Yeah, well, okay. So PLG, product led growth, instead of selling top down and saying, okay, hey, buyer of this technology, do you want to buy it and distribute it to your teams? I think the premise of product led growth is you sort of market and distribute to the end user of a software, and they buy it to solve their needs. And then, you get enough end users on, and then eventually you might bubble uh, up into the organization and sell to do a top-down sell.
When might it be the right approach for certain companies?
So I think that, again, VCs are guilty of basically pushing a tactic, that has nice characteristics and saying, well, this is good, everyone should do it, right? And so massive miscommunication, or rather myth, I guess, in the past couple of years is that, okay, product-led growth, like, it's worked well. Companies like Dropbox, companies like Slack, companies like Trello, I think, are all great examples of product-led growth. And so, they grew really fast, and they, don't have to. The dirty secret is that these companies are still spending a ton on sales and marketing, but, presumably they should have a lower CAC because they don't have to have an expensive outbound sales force. And VCs are saying, hey, this is what I want to invest in. OpenView as a whole, they've done all their fund marketing, around product-led growth, right? I think the part that people don't realize and or really need to drill down on is it's like a good product-led growth is really has to be picked up and, solve an individual's problem. It has to solve a frontline worker's problem. They have to feel the pain. They have to be able to find the tool themselves, and they need to have the ability to pick it up and start using it on their own without having to get permission from anyone else. And they have to be able to, swipe, some sort of corporate credit card, or even, be willing, in some cases, it's such a good product that they're willing to spend their own money on it, right? The thing is that lots of SaaS tools don't actually fit that description. Like compliance software, for example, is like not, something the end user is going to buy, right? So this is kind of like PLG compliance software. It's just not going to happen. And yet you see people trying to force, this product into this distribution method, and the two are, don't line up.
So it sounds like you got to have the right product. And I don't mean that just like the product itself, but even its design, right? If you just create this overall platform that can be configured in different ways, that doesn't necessarily really meet the needs of an individual user. And that individual user may not be willing to spend all the time and effort to configure it.
Yeah, exactly. It needs to be simple, and so if you're going PLG, it has to be simple, right? It's like, I think the idea is that you're taking a B2B product, but you are distributing it, B to C to, B, or B to little b to B, right? And, if you're going to do that, then it needs to be as easy to use as, your Instagram or your Spotify, right? And you need to like get started up quick, quick time to value, low onboarding, low overhead, low, you can't, some of the big questions are like, oh, can this user, do they actually have the authority? Do they need to get IT's, permission to, auth into this, or, or do you have to have, some sort of like corporate sign in, right? So these are all the questions that you need to be able to answer. And for most SaaS companies, that's just not it. But everyone's trying to wedge themselves into that model.
Great point. So I've had clients that they started out with, almost a free product that you could download and try and get momentum. And then maybe, hey, they got a smaller paid version of it. But then they get to this point where, well, Carlos, we need to pivot. We're great in small and medium businesses, but now, we got to get to these enterprise accounts. So my question to you is, when should someone pivot to more of a sales-led growth approach?
My experience from all, the companies that I've seen, and the folks that, I've talked to these folks that like were VP of sales at Trello, or were early at Box or Dropbox, or things like that. And generally, if you've got a PLG model that's really working, you are getting to tens of millions of revenue before you're opening up any sort of outbound sales motion, right? So when it works and it crushes, right? I think for earlier stage companies, when they start looking, they say, oh, maybe we need to do sales as well. It's because the unit economics on the PLG model don't really work for some reason. It's either, oh, okay, the ACV is low, but we still need to do a lot of hand holding to get people on board in the problem. Or the time to value isn't that fast. Or there's some sales cycle where, the end user might want it, but they can't actually authorize themselves to use it or put down the credit card. So then you've got, kind of salespeople trying to sell, but it's at a really low ACV and the unit economics don't work, right? So, I think that the rule of thumb for VCs is, sub 10K ACV, basically, no, you shouldn't really no sales touch, or, sub 3K, no sales touch, 3 to 10K, death zone, and above 10K, okay, you can actually start to use a sales team. So I think if you're sub 3K, it's like, hey, it's got to be self-serve. If you're above 10K, then you can usually kind of make all these rules of thumb for, 4X OTE, for a salesperson, you can kind of make the ratios work. And then if you're between those two, then you actually have to either figure out how to increase your ACV or, reduce time to value and sales cycle and make self-provisioning work. That's the VC rule of thumb.
So I really like that because it kind of gives you some guidance. So last question on the topic, and sorry, it's been a topic, it's been hot lately. So that's why I really love getting your perspective. It sounds like in some organizations, both models or approaches can exist, couldn't they? As long as they have a product that kind of fits the PLG market and maybe another or a more advanced product that might fit more of the sales side. Or am I thinking about utopia?
I agree with you 100%. I think that there's a false dichotomy between, okay, is this, PLG, we don't talk to our customers at all. We're just a bunch of engineers and products flying off the shelves. And sales led, we're having 2 martini lunches and selling in multi-million-dollar contracts, and there's nothing in between. Like the truth is, it's often a hybrid model. And, I call that a sales assist model, right? Which is, okay, maybe your product is getting in front of people on its own, and marketing is getting it in front of people, and users are, able to sign up and get some of the experience. But then the question is, at what point do you bring in the sales assist motion? At what point do you get a human in front of that person? And that could be, anywhere, the process I would use to describe is, think of your business as a funnel with, people coming in at the top, and then, acquisition, activation, engagement. So they start using the product. And then at some point, maybe they want to take a power user, or maybe they use a certain amount, they hit the paywall, you try to, get them to pay. And then obviously all the retention and referral. I guess at what point in that funnel is the right person to get a human in front of them? And so I think the typical PLG mindset is, oh, well, the sales is at the end of the funnel. The person's already paid, and maybe we're providing them some sort of customer support or customer success, right? But I think that for most SaaS products, unless it is truly going to be end-to-end self-serve by the end user, you probably need to get salespeople in there some point before people have actually paid for the product. And, that might be when they hit a paywall, that might not be. So at least at Kumospace, what we realized is, we sell this virtual office software. Well, we tried everything. We initially put it below, after people sold, we realized that was too late. Then we realized, oh, salespeople, anyone that talks to a salesperson is more likely to convert, is also at a higher ACV. So we said, oh, good, we should put sales at the top of the funnel. We didn't even let people get into the product. And then we realized, wait, that was too early. This is a new product. They need to experience. And then what we found was that just right was just after someone gets into the product and they're activated, that's the best time to get in front of them. They've entered the product, they've seen what could be their office, but they're not really sure how to set it up and configure it. And so what we did was we actually set up a Slack channel initially. That was before we moved off Slack and we built our own messaging product. So we set up a notification channel. Anytime a new customer that was qualified, they worked at a certain company of a certain size, entered into our product, we'd get a little notification and we would send in our BDR into their office. And so we were meeting them in their virtual office in Kumospace. And, actually it was so fast and we did it within 10 minutes of them getting in there that a lot of times they actually thought that our BDR Phil was an AI. And so he would go in there and say, "Hey, I'm Phil. I'm your Kumospace, product specialist. Just saw you just moved in. How can I, help you get you started?" And people would sit there, they would just ignore him because they thought this was like a clippy, basically. And then he'd just sit there. And then after a minute, he'd say, "Just to let you know, I'm not an AI. I'm a real person. I'm Phil." And then people would laugh and then they would apologize and they'd say, "Hey, sorry." And, that was a really great way of kind of breaking the ice and welcoming folks. And so, if I were to generalize this, I would say, hey, what's the right sort of time in the user journey? What's the right place, in terms of in the product, where's a native way to get, get your team in front of your users. And that's, right time, right place, right message, right? A way of helping and sort of think about your funnel, right time, right place, right message. And that's where you put in your sales assist.
I have to ask because you're just talking about Phil that you get mistaken for AI. Is Kumospace's plan to replace Phil with AI?
Look, one of our core values is humans first. That's literally our first value at Kumospace because, I think in a lot of ways, Kumospace is kind of we use AI, but we're a bit of an anti-AI software in the sense that we see the value of humans and the human collaboration, connectivity, and innovation comes from people getting together and generating new ideas, and then building them together, right? And so I don't. If it's not that Phil is going to replace, it's that Phil might be doing something completely different. Right.
Totally fair.
And,
Yeah.
that's how I think about how AI, I think it displaces labor, doesn't replace it.
Yeah.
And
Agreed.
so,
Agreed.
one of the things we're doing is, because we have this problem where you're fragmented across your tools, Kumospace is unifying those tools. How do we use AI to get information, across your organization, sort of make sure that, everyone's aligned across initiatives that span departments? How do we sort of capture that information, the communication that's going on, codify it, and then make sure it's shared across the organization? So, even in a physical company, right, you might not be on the same page as marketing because you didn't, bump into them or connect with them. And so that's where I think AI can get really great at making sure all the humans are aligned and rowing together.
I love that. So, Brett, you've had some business successes. You've had some business failures that you referenced earlier in the conversation. In terms of B2B revenue generation, how do you know when it's time to call it quits?
It's a very difficult question. And I think when I was younger, I thought that everything was about persistence. And I remember one year I was having my first company, and it was New Year's. I was with my friends, and then we do kind of a New Year's ritual every year. And I remember being like, "I'm literally gonna keep going until God Himself comes down here and plucks me off the earth, from this project." And as I got a little older, I realized that it's not always about persistence. It's actually a large part about resilience. And so I think it's kind of inevitable that you get, you know, you have losses and you get knocked off your feet, or your plans don't work. And I think at some point you have to kind of accept that, accept the facts for what they are and say, well, this didn't work. My hypothesis didn't it didn't play out. And here's why. I think it's very important to understand from both your successes. Successes, it's harder to figure out why it worked. Failures, usually you can attribute to, something specific. So actually failure is a better way to learn than success. And so, you can say, hey, this didn't work. Now I'm going to come back with this new lens, and, do it again. So I would say, if you can look at the facts, then you're getting the feedback from everyone around you, and it's not working, and your own hypotheses have been disproved, then it's time to start again. So I'll take resilience, even over persistence.
Love that. All right, so I'd love to talk to you all day. So this is that time of day where we start closing things out, and you've had a great, interesting career. So here's a question I always love to ask, because some of the biggest lessons I've learned in my life were missteps or mistakes, and maybe they really weren't mistakes, but that's, it's you turned right and you go, but from that, I learned a ton about myself and my direction. Brett, in your career, what might have been that one misstep or mistake that you went through that made you better and as successful as you are today?
So I think that a very common problem is, especially with young entrepreneurs, is just I think partnerships are so hard, right? We hear one of the most common causes for startup failure is, a failure of partnership. Founders have a fight and they break up, right? And so I think that a lot of people are half in, half out. They're upset with their partnership, but they, can't come to they can't fix it. They can't, move forward. Right. So I think that hey, look, avoid bad relationships. But if you find yourself in a difficult partnership, either fix it, come to a solution and move forward, or, get out, make it work, or move on quickly. And don't get caught in that middle ground and waste your life, because you're never going to succeed. There's a John Burroughs quote. It's a man can fail many times, but he isn't a failure until he begins to blame someone else.
Amazing. So that seems like some great advice, Brett, for all of our listeners. So I'm going to go right to, if a listener is interested in learning any more about you, what you're doing with Charge and Kumospace, what's your preferred method of communication?
Hey, so if you're building a remote or distributed team, and you're looking for a way to be faster, more productive, and communicate more effectively, and know where your team is and be accountable, then you should definitely hit me up at Kumospace, Brett at kumospace.com. Reference Sales Executive Podcast, and would love to hook you up. And if you're building something new technology and you're just getting off the ground, and you got a great idea and you're making it happen, would love to hear from you. Brett at charge.vc. So just reach out to me, reference the podcast, and would love to talk with you.
Amazing. Well, Brett, we know exactly how valuable your time is, so we cannot thank you enough for joining us today on the show.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It was a great conversation, and lovely learning from y'all as well.
Likewise. All right, everyone, that does it for this episode. Please check us out at www.b2brevexec.com and share this episode with your family, your friends, your kids, your dogs, and get them off screens for a little while. You can also subscribe through YouTube, Spotify, or Google Podcasts. And if you like what you hear, you can do us a huge favor and throw us a 5-star review on iTunes. I'm Lisa Schneier. I'm joined by my ever captivating podcast partner, Carlos Noche. And until next time, we wish you nothing but the greatest success.
You've been listening to the B2B Revenue Executive Experience. To ensure that you never miss an episode, subscribe to the show in iTunes or your favorite podcast player. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.